Hello students, this is Veena, Assistant Professor in the Department of English, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. Today I am going to talk about or provide you information about how to write your introduction and conclusion. This is very important thing which you all have to learn as future professionals because you are going to do research. You're going to present your presentations. You're going to present your research proposals. You're going to present your thesis. In all these entities, it is very important to have or to give effective introduction and a proper conclusion to whatever you are writing. So, this is one of the important topic in your module 5 speaking skills, that is writing introduction and conclusion. Today, let us try to understand what are the important tips which will help us to write good introduction and also a well-built conclusion. Let us get started. Here we go. Now, what are introductions and conclusions? Introduction and conclusion, they play a major role in writing your articles, proposals, journals, thesis, any kind of writer. These are the two elements which you all have to get mastered with. With these two important elements, that is the introduction and conclusion, the readers will have that impact. The readers will get interested in reading your write-up or article or your thesis. So, introduction and conclusion create the interest in your readers that you are going to provide the specific information about your article or your write-up in the introduction, and you are ending up with proper solution and suggesting for more improvements in your conclusion. So that is where you are going to need that expertise to present your introduction well and also your conclusion with all the important elements to be concluded. Now, today in this particular thing, we are going to learn how to write your introduction effectively and also your conclusion with all the impact such that it creates interest in your reader. Now, a good introduction should identify your topic. What is the element which is very important in your introduction? It must identify your topic. Whatever topic you have selected, your introduction must specifically inform your readers that you are going to talk about that particular introduction, that particular topic. So, it must have the introduction of your topic. What is that you are going to do? Next, provide essential context. On what context? What is the purpose of you writing about that topic? Why? What is the need or the purpose which has made you to give the information about that particular topic is more important, and indicate your particular focus in the essay. So, what are the things which are going to be included in your introduction? First thing, introduce your topic. Specify what is your topic. Then, you are going to tell the purpose or the need of your writing. Then next, you are going to put forward that contextual element to show the flow of the text. That is, you're going to tell them this is the procedure, why I have conducted this experiment such that it is going to give you this kind of information. So, be specific enough of what, where, when you have taken up that topic and what is the need to address that particular topic. Next, it also needs to engage your reader's interest. First and foremost important thing is to engage your readers' interest. How you're going to grasp the attention of your reader to read your text is being formulated through your topic introduction. So, your introduction must be well built with all those elements which cater the needs of the reader such that he has that interest to read that particular topic. Now, a strong conclusion. Now, that is about the introduction. Now, what is your conclusion? How can it be strong? Will provide a sense of closure to the essay. So, it must create that sense of closing element for everything. If you're writing, if you're speaking, there must be a conclusion. You must end it with a strong conclusion which will provide the sense of closureness to the reader. Next, while again placing your concepts in somewhat wider context. So, you are starting your topic with an introduction which specifies why, where, when, how you have taken the topic, and then it shows you flow towards writing your essays. By the end, you will try to summarize all the elements in a broader sense and try to grasp the interest of the reader in making it understand what he has read all round and what is that which is more important to be continued and to be understood in that particular essay. So, a strong conclusion and a good introduction, these two are the very, very important elements in your research works, in your thesis, your presentation, whatever you do to cater for your professional growth. These are the two elements which you have to remember always and try to practice so that you will create the reader's interest, you will create the audience interest towards you, and it will help you in your professional growth. Now, introducing your essay. How is that you are going to introduce your essay? Point 1. 2 sentences for an introduction. See that your introduction is short and sweet. If it is for an essay, you will introduce it in 2 lines. Just see that it will not extend more than 3 or 4. Finally. Okay. Next. Sentence 1. If you are going for 2 sentences, what is that sentence 1 going to represent? Refer to the question and include your knowledge of the text. What is the question? The question must be about the purpose of why you are writing that essay and knowledge of the text. What is the knowledge you already have about that question to address in that particular essay must be your sentence 1. Next, sentence 2. Create a sentence with 3 adjectives or ideas that will shape your essay. That means you will try to grasp the attention of the reader with the usage of adjectives or the ideas which you are going to address in that particular essay. This is the example which I have just taken to explain you majorly when you are writing a essay. Okay. Then, concluding your essay. How is that you are going to conclude your essay? 2 sentences for conclusion. Again, see that you stick to writing your conclusion in 2 sentences. If it is an essay, if it is a thesis, research thing, that is different again. Here I am just providing you the example of writing an introduction and conclusion to a essay. Okay. Now, in conclusion also, try to confine it to 2 sentences. What will be the first sentence? Summarize what you think of a question. Link to what you say in the intro and throughout. So, you are going to summarize that question which you have introduced in the introduction and try to link up with that information. Next, sentence 2. State what the overall message of the text is. What is the gist of that text stated? So, this must be the proper criteria to address a essay, as introduction or the conclusion. Next, common features. What are the common features for introductions and conclusions? First one, short, 2 sentences each. This criteria is mainly for essay. So, here we are confining it to 2 sentences each. That is, introduction and the conclusion we are taking up with 2 sentences. Next, use the author's surname. Don't use the full name. You can use the author surname. Then, include the text name. Next, link to the questions. That is keywords. Link. Always see that there is a relation, interconnection dependent with each other. Next, terminology linked to the structure of the whole play. What is a terminology? What is a word-based thing you are going to use with this? Next, reference to the whole text. How is that you are going to refer the whole text will be addressed here. Next, context or writer's intentions are included. Or what is your intention in providing in this context? This particular situation is more important. So, this is one of the example that we are using the introduction and the conclusion in an essay. Now, the introductions for most papers can be effectively written in 1 paragraph. Now, we have seen that for essays, we can take 2 sentences. But for write-ups, okay, for papers, you can use 1 paragraph occupying half to 3/4 of the first page. So, you can write 1 paragraph or you can write 3/4 of the first paragraph, first page. Then your introduction may be longer than that and it may take more than 1 paragraph. But be sure you know why. See that always your introduction is precise and specific. If you are tend to extend the introduction part, you must know why you are doing it. If you are missing any point, if you want to address your readers more number of information, you are going to exceed it. If not, confine it to the 3/4 of your first page. See that it is only 1 paragraph in your papers. Then, the introduction must laid out in clear, detailed fashion of the theme. It must be clear and it must be detailed and specific. Don't use more number of sentences revolving about throughout the same idea. See that you are specific. See that you are clearly mentioning the elements what are important for that particular paper. So, such that develop your introduction with clarity, with specific information what has to be addressed to your reader or your speaker. Next, how to write an introduction? What are the tips to write your introduction? Point 1. The introduction of the essay or paper must be substantial. What is substantial? It must be catering all the needs of the substance which you are taking. It must revolve around that context, that particular theme or the substance which is mentioned in that particular essay or paper or journal or research thesis, anything. Next, the reader ought to have noticeably clear idea of author's purpose of writing. So, introduction must be clearly mentioning the purpose of author's writing. What is the purpose that he has taken up to provide this sort of information to his or her readers is the most important element. Next, after reading the introduction, you need to stop and ask yourself. Now, after reading your introduction, what are the things which you are going to ask yourself? What are the questions which you are going to reflect yourself? Point 1. Where the rest of the paper is headed. You have written the introduction. Now, first point. Now, where will this paper take me towards? Where will the path of this paper lead to? Where will it get headed towards? That means, where will the path? What is the path on which way this content is going to lead me? That is the most important question. Next, what the individual paragraph in its body will address. Now you have given proper introduction with all the specific information. Now when it comes to the body, what is the information which you are going to divide in different paragraph and specify idea for each paragraph? How is that you are going to segregate that process of providing information into various paragraphs such that you are going to formulate a body of that paper. Next, what the general nature of the conclusion will be. So, what will be your conclusion? How is the gist which you are going to create will be formulated is the important entity. So, while you are writing introduction, see that the body leads to the proper formation of the paragraphs with ideas which are to be formulated and to be addressed to the readers. Then you are going to give proper conclusion to all the elements which you have discussed in that particular paper. Next comes, how do I write interestingly? Effective introduction. This is the most important thing. What are the things which will make your introduction look more effective and appealing to the readers? What is that? Let us see. Find a startling statistic that illustrate the seriousness of the problem. Startling statistic is that which surprises your audience, that which surprise your reader. Give an evidence or a proof which will make your reader tend to read it. That surprising thing, that twisting thing, whatever you are going to talk in introduction will create that interest in your reader to read your complete text. So, try to give that startling, surprising introduction to your essay. Next, quote an expert, but be sure to introduce him or her first. Try to quote of an eminent philosopher, professor, but you have to again replace their name, introduce them. Why, in what situation they have quoted that particular text which you are mentioning it here. In what way it is related to your text. All these elements must also be addressed. Next, mention a common misperception that your thesis will argue against. That means you are going to show or tend to introduce a misconception on which you are going to argue in your thesis. That means oppose. That is, you are going to show that this is what is here, but I am not agreeing to that. I am going to talk something which will talk positively on the basis of it. So, either you introduce a misconception and try to argue on it, or introduce some good philosopher's quotes such that it creates interest in your readers, or you will do a startling statement such that your readers are tended towards you to read that text. Next, use a brief narrative or anecdote. Brief narrative is very brief narration of the elements which you are going to discuss. Or anecdote, that means give information of what is going to be addressed in that particular paper. Next, it encourages personal reflection. That is, when someone is reading your introduction, it must encourage him to have personal reflection of the elements what you are talking. So, he must be able to identify or reflect himself personally in your introduction such that he tends to read further. Okay. Next. In a science paper, explain key scientific concepts. Try to explain scientific concepts and refer to relevant literature. That is about the past elements which have done research over it and what are the improvements you are going to carry out to prove that research is very good or better. Next, in more technical papers, define a term that is possibly unfamiliar to your audience. Try to talk about the things which are not known to your audience so that they will tend to know, Hare, I have missed this point. Where did I miss? That kind of interest the audience should have while reading your introduction. So these are all the things which you all have to remember while writing your introduction. Now, in fleshing out your introduction, you will want to avoid some common pitfalls. Till now, we have learnt what are the things we have to do while writing our introduction. Now, we will try to understand what we should not do while writing an introduction. What is that? Point 1. Don't provide dictionary definitions. No need of providing any dictionary definitions to the words which you are using. They must be very simple and many of them know. Don't try to explain them with the dictionary definition which is completely formal in addressing. Okay? Next, especially of words your audience already know. Your audience already know it. Why is that you are explaining it in detail, that too with the dictionary meaning? No need. No need of using that particular formal kind of dictionary meaning words. You can just generally use specific words which are already known to your audience. Next, don't repeat the assignment specification. Don't go on repeat the specification of article or whatever you have introduced it once. It's okay. It is understood to the audience that you are going to talk about particular assignment and what are the steps you are going to take up. Don't go on repeat the same statements. That will look very clumsy. Next, don't give details in depth explanation that really belong in your body paragraphs. If you give information, everything in the introduction, what is left for your body paragraphs? So don't give in-depth explanation in the introduction itself. Just give outline of the information which you are going to discuss in the body of that particular write-up. So try to give superficial information, outline on which you are going to talk in the body of that particular write-up and discuss in depth of that particular context. So don't tend to write more deeply in the introduction such that nothing is left for the body of that particular write-up. Next, how to write a good introduction. Now, these are some tips which will help you in write good introduction. First one, keep your first sentence short. Always be specific, be formal. Next, don't repeat the title. Don't go on repeat the title. Once you have mentioned, everyone know about your title, it's enough. Don't go on repeat about the same sentence of that title. Next, keep the introduction brief. Brief and concise will create interest. If you go on writing more and more or specifically informing about everything in the introduction, then there will not be any interest to the reader to read further. Okay? Next, use the word you at least once. Try to use this word you such that the reader or the audience will connect to your essay or the write-up. Next, dedicate 1-2 lines to articulating what the article covers. In between, try to dedicate 1-2 lines on what this article is going to cover. Next, dedicate 1-2 sentences to explain why the article is important. You have to dedicate 1 or 2 sentences stating why this article is important also. Next, refer to a concern or problem your readers might have. Try to take up that content while writing your essays, which will indicate the position or the problem of your readers, such that if they read your article, they may have some solution for that particular problem. Next, but be careful telling stories. You can tell stories, you can illustrate examples, but be careful. They must be referring your content. They must be apt to that particular situation while you are writing or speaking. Next, use a stat or fact to convey importance. Always try to use statistical analysis or the evidences to show the importance of that particular write-up. So, you're going to use all these things, keep all these things in your mind to make a good introduction while you are writing your research papers. Now, coming to how to write your conclusion. What are the elements which you all have to remember while you are formulating your conclusion to the research papers, thesis, journals, articles, essays, or any kind of write-up? There must be a proper conclusion formulated. It is a conclusion. It will give the sense of closure and the satisfaction to the reader and as well as the writer. Now see, the conclusion of the paper should reiterate the main points. What are the main points? Never introduce new ideas or things not discussed in the body of the paper, and bring the argument home. So, try to bring the argument home, that is, end up the argument which was presented in the introduction and which was formulated and discussed in the body. You will be bringing it to the conclusion. You will be closing that element. Never ever try to add new idea in the conclusion. That will create confusion and clumsiness in your research article. Next, the force with which you express the theme here is especially important, because if you are ever going to convince the reader that your thesis has merit, it will be in the conclusion. Where is that you are going to create that impression on your reader? That is in the conclusion. In the conclusion, the reader will decide the merit of your article. He will judge whether with the conclusion, whether you have really appealed him, really convinced him with the information, what you have transformed him through the introduction and the body of that particular element. Next, conclusion is the point where you will persuade others to adopt your writing. Conclusion is the place where you will persuade. That means you will create that interest in the reader to accept your writing, to accept your paper, and make sure that all the points are addressed so that they are properly closed in the conclusion, such that your audience is accepting your conclusion by the end. So, it is the persuading your audience or the readers at the end of your write-ups. If the theme is clear and makes sense, the conclusion ought to be quite easy to write. If you're clear with your introduction, if you're clear with your discussions, explanations and suggestions in the body, then your conclusion is very, very easy. Simply begin by restating the theme. What is that you're going to include in your conclusion? Simply begin with restating the theme. What was the theme of that paper? Just restate it. Next, then review the facts you cited in the body of the paper in support of your argument. Just review that points, what are referring to that particular theme in very few lines. Then, it's advisable to rehearse them in some detail and end with a final reiteration of the theme. That is, you are going to sum up with all the important points of the gist of the theme which you have discussed and try to retrieve that sense of understanding of the entire article. Next, some general advice about conclusion. What are the things which have to be kept in mind while formulating your conclusions? What is that? It is not merely a summary. It is a statement of your thesis. You are ending up with a statement of your thesis which will create an impact of your reader. If you wish to summarize, often do, but it should be in the fresh language. If you want to summarize in the conclusion, don't use the same wordings or the same sentences which you used to build your essay or the thesis. Try to use some fresh language to explain that particular theme. Next, remind the reader how the evidence you have presented has contributed to your thesis. Try to remind the reader about the evidences you have projected in that particular thesis and in what way they are helped you to close that statement. Okay. Next, the conclusion, like much of the rest of the paper, involves critical thinking. By the end of your write-up, the audience or the reader must have critical thought over the explanation which is given in that particular context. So remember, always try to formulate a nice statement at the end such that it ends with a good note and it gives closure to the elements which you want to discuss. Now, broaden your focus. Try to broaden the focus. Try to imbibe all those notions which you have created, which you have addressed, and which you are now concluding. So it should be broadened in the end. Then a good last sentence, leave your reader with something to think about. Always see that while ending up with any conclusion, that conclusion the reader must think about whether it is true, whether it is right, whether it fetched the need of his information, what all that must be addressed in your conclusion. Then for most essays, one well-developed paragraph is sufficient for a conclusion. Always be fresh. Develop the notion which you have created and try to imbibe that sense of closing with the statement of evidence and proof and suggesting them, pushing them towards their critical thoughts and enlightening them about their proposal, what has addressed to them in that essay. All these things must be revised in your conclusion. Next, in some cases, a 2 or 3 paragraph conclusion can be done. That can be done in your research papers, your thesis. You can use 2 or more paragraph, but be specific and try to address all the needs of your reader such that it will end on a very good note. Next, how do I write an interesting, effective conclusion? What are the things which are very, very helpful in making your conclusion effective? First point, the following are the strategies. What is that? If your essay deals with contemporary problem, warn readers that possible consequences. That is, if you are addressing some problem, not just contemporary problem, if you are addressing some problem, see that you provide a conclusion or a suggestion by the end. If you're reading that problem, if you're leaving that problem there itself without any conclusion, then it will end abruptly. So, try to provide a solution or a suggestion to that particular problem which you have addressed. Next, recommend a specific course of action. That is, what is that you are going to do after this with this information. Course of action. Next, use an apt quotation or expert opinion to lend authority to the conclusion. You can add expert's opinion, you can add some evidence or a quotation of a professional to add more smartness to your conclusion. You can do that. Next, it must be a relevant narrative. Your conclusion must be a relevant narrative of your introduction and the body of your write-up. Next, it must be an anecdote. You must make it as an anecdote. Refer to that element or the information or the conceptual theme of what you are addressing. Next, in a science or social science paper, mention worthwhile advances for future research. If you are writing a research paper, if you are writing a thesis, try to give more suggestions for further study of that particular research element. So, that will help to give suggestion to other people who are reading to take up the research like that. Next, when writing a conclusion for an email, business, technical document or web page, keep the following principles. These are the principles which you have to remember while you are giving conclusion to an email or a document or a web page or any such thing. First one, do not summarize the points made in the body of the writing unless you have created a lengthy document. If it is a lengthy document, then summarize the body. If it is not a lengthy document, if it is a small write-up, try to use some fresh language to conclude it. You will not re-revise or summarize what has written in that 2 to 3 paragraphs again, if it is a small write-up. Next, keep the paragraph short and direct. It must be short, specific and direct. It must address very quickly, formally, what has to be done after this information has been transferred to you. That's all. Next, include any call to action. If you are addressing a problem, try to give a suggestion, try to call for an action against that problem. You can end up it like that. Next, summary of the main points. What are the main points which are discussed in that particular theme? How is that they are going to close? How is that you are going to end up that with proper wordings? Next, your findings. What are your findings through that research? What is the statistical data you have acquired? What is the result of it? What is the judgment? What is your finding? Is it good or bad? If it is good, what are the things you are suggesting? If it is bad, what is the action you are going to take to make it good? So these are all the important things which you have to remember while concluding your research paper. Then comes your response to the question. If you have formulated a question in the beginning in your introduction, you must be giving response. You must be answering all those questions which you have formulated in the beginning and in between the body of your thesis. Next, remaining problems and questions. How is that? You're going to address the remaining problems and the questions which you have not spoken in your write-up, and what is the way, what is the action you are going to take up to answer those questions will be provided in the conclusion formulated in your research thesis. So these are all the main aspects which you have to remember while formulating your conclusion. So always remember, introduction and conclusion are the most important parts while writing your research, while writing your thesis, while writing your articles, journals or any small write-ups. You have to have effective introduction and effective conclusion. This will help you to start efficiently with all the elegance, formulate the questions which you are going to address and end up on a very good note. So, practice makes man perfect. So, try to practice these two things such that your thesis presentation will be done in a very good and in a very exploratory and clear manner, and it will fetch us marks with all integrity and makes you different from others. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.